imagine the date, April 18th, 1775. The air in Boston is thick, not just with the dampness of the spring night, but with a tension you could almost taste. This wasn't just another Tuesday evening. This was a night poised on the knife's edge of history. A single whisper away from a roar that would echo through centuries. In the cobblestone streets, shadows danced under the flickering glow of lanterns. Each clatter of a horse's hoof, each distant shout, seemed to carry a secret message. This was a city holding its breath, waiting for a spark. The British regulars, the redcoats, moved with a purpose that felt ominous. Their polished boots struck the stones with a crisp, rhythmic beat that sounded less like a patrol and more like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something monumental. They were gathering, not in the boisterous way of soldiers heading to a tavern, but with a quiet, disciplined urgency that sent a chill through anyone watching from a darkened window. They were preparing for a mission, a secret march under the cover of darkness. Their target, the colonial militia's cache of weapons and gunpowder stored miles away in the town of Kong. Seizing these supplies was meant to be a swift, decisive blow, a show of force to quell the rising tide of rebellion before it could truly begin. The British command believed that by disarming the colonists, they could cut the head off the snake, but they had dangerously underestimated the serpent's resolve. Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of the city, another network was buzzing with life. This was a web of patriots, of spies and messengers, a community bound by a shared, dangerous dream of liberty. Men like Dr. Joseph Warren, a respected physician by day and a key leader of the resistance by night, were the nerve center of this operation. From his surgery, he gathered intelligence, piecing together fragments of conversations overheard and reports from sympathetic eyes and ears across the city. He knew the British were planning something big. The unusual troop movements, the hushed preparations on the warships anchored in the harbor, all pointed to an imminent strike. The question wasn't if, but when and where. The fate of the revolution hinged on this intelligence. If the British succeeded in their surprise raid, the colonists would be left defenseless, their burgeoning movement crippled before it could even stand. The information Dr. Warren held was more valuable than gold. It was the key to survival. He had to get word out, to warn the militia leaders in Lexington and men like John Hancock and Samuel Adams. They were the very soul of the rebellion, and rumors suggested the British might also be planning to arrest them. But how do you send a message out of a city that is becoming a fortress, with British patrols on every corner and the waterways watched? This is where the legendary lantern signal, came into play. It was a simple yet ingenious code, prearranged with patriots watching from across the Charles River in Charlestown. The signal was to be hung in the steeple of the Old North Church, the highest point in Boston, visible 4 miles. 1, if by land, 2, if by sea. 1 lantern meant the British troops were marching out of Boston by land, taking the long route over the Boston Neck. 2 lanterns meant they were taking the faster route, rowing across the Charles River. This signal wasn't just a message, it was a trigger, the first domino to fall in a chain reaction of defiance. The man entrusted with this critical task was the church sexton, Robert Newman. Quietly, he would have to slip past the British sentries, climb the dusty, narrow stairs of the steeple, and hold those lights high for all to see. The risk was immense. If caught, he would face a traitor's death. As night deepened, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place for Dr. Warren. His sources confirmed the British were moving toward the water, preparing boats. The route was by sea. The time had come. He summoned 2 of his most trusted couriers, a silversmith named Paul Revere and a tanner named William Dawes. These were not soldiers. They were ordinary men, driven by an extraordinary commitment to their cause. Their mission was perilous, to ride through the night, through enemy-patrolled territory, and carry the warning to Lexington and Concord. They were the voices that would turn the silent alarm of the lanterns into a living, breathing call to arms. Dawes was sent first, taking the land route as a diversion, his task to slip past the heavily guarded Boston Neck. His journey was a masterclass in stealth, blending in, acting nonchalant while his heart hammered against his ribs. A short while later, Paul Revere prepared for his own journey across the water. 2 friends rowed him silently across the Charles River. their oars muffled with cloth to avoid detection by the British warship. HMS Somerset anchored menacingly in the harbor. Revere landed in Charlestown, where Patriots were waiting, their eyes fixed on the old North Church steeple. As he secured a horse, the signal flashed to life. 2 lanterns, burning like twin stars of defiance in the darkness. The British were coming by sea. The whisper had just become a shout. Revere spurred his horse, and the thundering of its hooves on the dirt roads began a new rhythm for the night. This was no longer just the sound of a lone rider. It was the drumbeat of a revolution waking up. As he galloped through the countryside, he didn't just shout, "The British are coming," as legend often simplifies. His message was more specific, more urgent. The regulars are coming out. He was warning his own people, the members of the colonial militia, that the king's professional soldiers were on the march. Every door he banged on, every town he rode through, Medford, Minnetimi, Lexington, was another link in the chain of alarm. Lights began to appear in farmhouse windows. Men grabbed their muskets, said hurried goodbyes to their families, and began to gather on their town greens. The network was working. The whisper before the storm had become a gale-force wind, sweeping through the Massachusetts countryside. The night of April 18, 1775, was a tapestry woven from threads of fear and courage, of secrecy and bold action. It was a story of ordinary people, doctors, silversmiths, tanners, and farmers who chose to risk everything for an idea. The flickering lanterns in the steeple weren't just a signal. They were a symbol of hope in the darkness, a declaration that even in the face of overwhelming power, the light of liberty would not be extinguished. As Revere and Dawes rode on, and as hundreds of Minutemen prepared to stand their ground, the quiet night was irrevocably broken. The storm was no longer gathering. It had arrived. The stage was set for the clash that would take place on Lexington Green at dawn, a clash that would begin with a single, fateful gunshot T-shot heard round the world. The American Revolution had begun. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. The story of that night is a powerful reminder of how small acts of courage can change the world. If you found this chapter of history as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we yellow stand with the Minutemen on Lexington Green as the sun rises on a new day of conflict and courage. We'll see you then. Welcome bike history lovers. In our last chapter, we set the stage. Now, let's dive into the heart of the storm. Boston in the early 1770s. Imagine this. You walk out of your home, and the air is thick, not just with the salty scent of the harbor, but with a palpable tension. Red-coated British soldiers are everywhere. They patrol your streets, stand guard on your corners, a constant, living symbol of a king an ocean away. This is daily life in occupied Boston. And for the colonists, every single day feels like a pressure cooker with the heat turned way up. So, how did we get here? Remember the Boston Tea Party? That audacious act of defiance where colonists, disguised as Native Americans, dumped an entire shipment of British tea into the harbor. It was a bold statement against taxation without representation, a cry for freedom that echoed across the Atlantic. But cries for freedom often meet with the clenched fist of power. King George III and the British Parliament were not amused. In fact, they were furious. Their response was swift, and it was severe. They unleashed a series of laws so harsh, so punitive, that the colonists didn't just call them unfair. They called them the Intolerable Acts. Let's break down what these intolerable acts actually were, because they're the fuel that turns the smoldering embers of resentment into a raging fire. First, the Boston Port Act. This was a complete lockdown. Parliament shut down Boston Harbor, the lifeblood of the city's economy. No ships in, no ships out, until the colonists paid for the destroyed tea. Think about it. Fishermen couldn't fish, merchants couldn't trade, and families started to worry about where their next meal would come from. This wasn't just a punishment. It was an economic siege designed to starve the city into submission. Next up was the Massachusetts Government Act. This one struck at the very heart of colonial civilization. It essentially stripped Massachusetts of its charter and gave the royally appointed governor unprecedented power. Town meetings, the bedrock of local democracy where colonists had debated and governed themselves for generations, were now severely restricted. They could only be held once a year, and only with the governor's permission. The message from London was crystal clear. You are not in charge. We are. This act of stripping away their political voice was, for many, an insult even greater than the economic hardship. Then came the Administration of Justice Act. The colonists had a nickname for this one: the Murder Act. Why? Because it allowed a royal official accused of a capital crime in the colonies to be tried in Britain instead of To the colonists, this seemed like a get-out-of-jail-free card for any soldier or official who might harm a colonist. It screamed that a British life was more valuable than an American one, and that justice was a one-way street. The sense of fairness, of being treated as equal British subjects, was crumbling fast. And finally, there was the Quartering Act. This one was personal. It required the colonists to house British soldiers in their homes if barracks were unavailable. Imagine being forced to share your food, your space, and your privacy with the very soldiers who represented the oppressive force you were protesting. It brought the conflict from the streets right into the living room. Every meal, every conversation was held under the watchful eye of the Crown's enforcers. It was an invasion of personal liberty of the highest order. The effect of these acts was the exact opposite of what Parliament intended. Instead of crushing the rebellious spirit of Massachusetts, they galvanized it. The oppression didn't create submission. It forged an ironclad defiance, resentment, which had been simmering for years over things like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts, now boiled over into outright outrage. People who were once on the fence, who maybe thought the Sons of Liberty were too radical, were now looking at the redcoats on their streets and thinking, maybe they have a point. The feeling in Boston became a potent mix of fear and fury. There was the fear of a military crackdown, the fear of starvation, the fear that their way of life was being systematically dismantled. But underneath that fear was a powerful, growing defiance. Secret meetings were held in taverns and back rooms. Committees of correspondence, which were like the social media networks of their day, worked overtime, sending letters and pamphlets flying between the colonies. The message was simple. Boston's fight is our fight. What is happening in Massachusetts today could happen in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in any of the colonies tomorrow. This shared sense of threat created something new, something powerful, a shared American identity. They began to see themselves not just as Virginians or New Yorkers, but as Americans, united against a common enemy. The intolerable acts, designed to isolate and punish one colony, ended up being the very thing that brought all 13 of them closer together. Other colonies rallied to Boston's side, sending supplies and messages of support. They knew that the cause of Boston, as George Washington called it, is and ever will be considered as the cause of America. So, as we leave Boston in this chapter, the city is the streets are filled with soldiers, the harbor is empty, and the taverns are buzzing with hushed, angry whispers of rebellion. The air is electric with the feeling that something has to give. Oppression and defiance are locked in a death grip, and everyone knows it. It's only a matter of time before a spark ignites the whole thing into a revolution. The stage is set for conflict, and the first shots are not far off. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. It's the support from viewers like you that allows us to keep telling these crucial stories. If you found this chapter illuminating, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss Chapter 3. We'll see you next time. Hello, history lovers, and welcome back to our deep dive into the American Revolution. In our last chapter, we saw the flames of rebellion being fanned. But how did a few scattered sparks turn into a full-blown inferno? The answer lies in the shadows, within a group that mastered the art of secrets and signals. The Sons of Liberty. This is the story of their secret Patriot network. By the early 1770s, Boston was a powder keg, and the Sons of Liberty were the ones holding the match. But they weren't just angry men in taverns. They were architects of a revolution, building its very foundation not with bricks and mortar, but with whispers and ink. At the heart of this clandestine world were men whose names we now know, but whose true work was done far from the public eye. First, you have Samuel Adams. He was more than just a brewer and a politician. He was the master puppeteer, the ideological engine of the movement. Adams had an unmatched talent for propaganda and an uncanny ability to connect with everyone, from the dock workers on the waterfront to the wealthy merchants in their counting houses. He understood that a revolution needed more than just gore. It needed a narrative. It needed a story of liberty versus tyranny, and he was its most powerful storyteller. He would spend countless hours, often by the dim glow of a single candle, drafting letters and pamphlets that would circulate throughout the colonies, each word carefully chosen to ignite a sense of shared purpose. Then there was John Hancock, the polished, wealthy merchant. His signature on the Declaration of Independence is famous for its flourish, but his most vital contribution came much earlier. Hancock provided the financial fuel for the revolution. His immense wealth funded the Sons of Liberty's operations, from printing pamphlets to acquiring necessary supplies. Imagine the risk. He was one of the richest men in the colonies, with everything to lose. Yet, he bankrolled a movement that could have seen him try for treason and stripped of his entire fortune. His commitment wasn't symbolic. It was tangible, found in every coin he provided to keep the dream of liberty alive. In the inner circle, we also find Dr. Joseph Warren, a respected physician. By day, he healed the sick. By night, he was a key strategist for the Patriot cause. His medical practice gave him unique access to homes and businesses all across Boston, allowing him to move freely without raising suspicion. He was a trusted figure, and people would speak openly with him. Warren was a master intelligence gatherer, collecting information from his patients and contacts, piecing together British troop movements and plans. He was the eyes and ears of the Sons of Liberty, and his calm, steady presence was a source of strength in their secret councils. And of course, Paul Revere. We all know the story of his midnight ride, but that was just one night in a lifetime of revolutionary work. Revere was a skilled silversmith and engraver, but his true genius lay in his role as the network's chief courier. He was a man of action. While Adams wrote and Hancock funded, Revere rode. He established a web of express riders and secret routes that connected Boston to other Patriot groups throughout Massachusetts and beyond. He memorized back roads, knew which innkeepers were friendly, and could deliver a coded message faster than any official royal mail. He was the human internet of the 1770s, ensuring that a call for help in Boston would be heard in Lexington and Concord in a matter of hours, not days. Their meeting places were as secret as their plans. Forget grand halls and public squares. The real work of the revolution happened in the back rooms of taverns like the Green Dragon, which became known as the headquarters of the revolution. It happened in the quiet lofts of workshops, or in the basements of trusted members' homes. Picture it. A handful of men gathered around a rough wooden table, the only light from flickering candles, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The air is thick with tension and the smell of pipe smoke. Voices are kept low, almost to a whisper. On the table you might see a coded letter, perhaps using a cipher based on a commonly owned book, or a map with markings that only they could understand. These weren't just casual conversations. They were strategic planning sessions. They discussed how to organize boycotts of British goods, how to intimidate stamp tax collectors into resigning, and how to coordinate protests that looked spontaneous but were, in fact, meticulously planned. They developed a system of signals, a lantern in a church steeple, a specific way of ringing a bell, or even the placement of an object in a window could convey a critical piece of information across the city without a single word being spoken. This network was sophisticated, resilient, and absolutely essential. It allowed the Patriots to stay one step ahead of the British authorities, who consistently underestimated the level of organization and coordination among the colonists. The British governor, Thomas Hutchinson, and General Thomas Gage knew something was brewing. They had spies and informants, but they could never quite penetrate the core of the Sons of Liberty's network. The Patriots were bound by a shared ideology and deep personal trust. Betrayal was rare because they weren't just co-conspirators. They were neighbors, friends, and brothers, and a common cause. They understood that a single leak could unravel everything they had worked for and could lead them all to the gallows. This secret network was the nervous system of the revolution. It transmitted information, coordinated action, and fostered a sense of unity across the 13 colonies. It transformed isolated pockets of discontent into a powerful, unified movement. The work done by candlelight in those hidden rooms laid the groundwork for everything that was to come. It was here, in the shadows, that the idea of America was truly forged. It proved that a revolution isn't just won on the battlefield. It's first won in the hearts and minds of the people, connected by a thread of secret communication and unbreakable trust. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the secret world of the Sons of Liberty. The story is only getting more intense from here. If you enjoyed this chapter and want to see what happens next, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. We'll see you then. Welcome back to our series on the American Revolution. Today, we're diving into the life of a man whose name is synonymous with a dramatic midnight ride, but whose story is so much richer and more complex. Let's talk about the silversmith, the patriot, the legend himself, Paul Revere. Before he galloped into the history books, Paul Revere was, first and foremost, a master craftsman. Imagine the bustling streets of pre-revolutionary Boston. In the heart of this vibrant city, Revere's shop was a hub of activity. It wasn't just any silversmith. He was one of the finest in the colonies. His work was exquisite teapots, spoons, and engravings that were prized by Boston's elite. He was a successful entrepreneur, a respected community leader, and a dedicated family man. With a sprawling network of children and grandchildren, he was the epitome of the colonial American dream, a self-made man who achieved prosperity through skill and hard work. But beneath this veneer of a successful artisan, a revolutionary fire was beginning to burn. Revere was more than just a businessman. He was a connector of people. His trade put him in touch with everyone, from wealthy merchants to humble dock workers. This unique position made him an invaluable asset to the growing Patriot cause. He was a key member of the Sons of Liberty, that secret society of rabble-rousers and thinkers who were orchestrating the resistance against British rule. He was privy to their most clandestine meetings and was trusted implicitly. He wasn't just a passive supporter. He was an active and eager participant in the fight for liberty. This wasn't a side gig for him. It was a deeply held conviction. He even took up dentistry on the side, crafting false teeth, which further expanded his network and knowledge of the city's happenings. Long before his famous ride, Revere had already established himself as the principal courier for the Boston Patriots. Think of him as the information highway of the Revolution. When the Boston Committee of Correspondence needed to get urgent news to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, who did they send? Paul Revere. He would saddle up his horse and ride for days, carrying secret letters and intelligence that were vital to coordinating the colony's efforts. He made multiple long-distance journeys, becoming a familiar and trusted face among Patriot leaders up and down the Atlantic coast. These rides weren't just a casual trot. They were dangerous, demanding journeys that tested his endurance and his courage. Each trip solidified his reputation as a man of action, someone who could be counted on when the stakes were highest. So why was Revere so dedicated? It wasn't just about politics. It was personal. He witnessed firsthand the impact of British policies like the Stamp Act and the Townsend Acts on his business and his neighbors. He saw the increasing presence of British soldiers in his city as an occupation. He was part of the group that organized the Boston Tea Party, a direct act of defiance. His engravings, like the famous depiction of the Boston Massacre, were powerful pieces of propaganda that shaped public opinion and fueled anti-British sentiment. He wasn't just reporting the news, he was shaping the narrative. He used his artistic talent as a weapon in the ideological war, galvanizing his fellow colonists to see the British not as protectors, but as oppressors. As tensions escalated in the spring of 1775, Boston was a powder keg waiting for a spark. General Thomas Gade, the British military governor, was determined to crush the rebellion. He knew that the colonists were stockpiling weapons and gunpowder in the nearby town of Concord. He also had orders to arrest two of the most prominent Patriot leaders, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, who were hiding out in Lexington. The Patriots, however, had their own intelligence network, with Revere at its very center. They knew the British were planning something big. The question wasn't if, but when and how. This is where Revere's role shifted from a reliable courier to a legendary sentinel. The stage was set. The British regulars were preparing to march. The fate of the revolution hung in the balance, resting on the ability of the Patriots to get a warning out in time. Dr. Joseph Warren, a key Patriot leader, summoned Revere for the most critical mission of his life. He needed his most trusted rider to alert Adams, Hancock, and the countryside that the British were coming. This wasn't just another delivery run. This was the moment that all of his previous experiences, his knowledge of the roads, his network of contacts, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to the cause of liberty would be put to the ultimate test. The silversmith was about to become a symbol of American vigilance and defiance. So, when we think of Paul Revere, let's remember the whole man. The skilled artisan whose hands created beauty, the savvy businessman who understood the pulse of his city, the dedicated family man who had everything to lose, and the passionate patriot who risked it all. Not just on one famous night, but for years leading up to it. He was a cornerstone of the revolutionary movement, a man whose quiet, steady work behind the scenes made the loud, explosive moments of the revolution possible. His story is a powerful reminder that heroes are often forged in the everyday dedication to a cause they believe in, long before their one shining moment in the spotlight. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the life of Paul Revere. In our next chapter, we'll saddle up alongside him for that fateful midnight ride, and see how his warning lit the spark that ignited the American Revolution. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter of this incredible story. See you next time. Welcome back to our journey through the American Revolution. Last time, we saw tensions simmering to a boiling point. Now, in Chapter 5, we witness the spark that ignites the flame. The British plan unfolds. The year is 1775. Boston is a city under occupation, a powder keg waiting for a single, stray ember. The man holding the match is General Thomas Gage, the military governor of Massachusetts. From his headquarters, he sees the growing defiance of the colonists, the stockpiling of weapons, and the increasingly bold rhetoric of rebellion. He knows he must act, and act decisively, to crush this insurgency before it becomes a full-blown war. In the dim, flickering candlelight of his chambers, Gage and his most trusted officers huddle over maps of the Massachusetts countryside. Their plan is audacious, a two-pronged strike designed to decapitate the Patriot leadership and disarm the militia. The primary objective, known to most of the command, is a march to the town of Concord. Intelligence reports suggest the colonists have amassed a significant arsenal there. Cannons, muskets, gunpowder, and shot. Seizing these supplies would be a devastating blow to the militia's ability to fight. But there was another, more clandestine layer to this operation. A secret whispered only among the highest echelons. On the road to Concord lay the small village of Lexington, and in Lexington, staying at the home of Reverend Jonas Clark, were two of the most wanted men in the colonies, Samuel Adams and John Hancock. Adams, the fiery orator and master propagandist, the grand incendiary of the rebellion. Hancock, the wealthy merchant and president of the Provincial Congress, whose signature would one day become a symbol of defiance itself. Gage's orders were clear. A force of elite grenadiers and light infantry, around 700 of his best men, would march under the cover of darkness. They were to move swiftly and silently, catching the colonists completely by surprise. First, they would detour to Lexington to arrest Adams and Hancock. These traitors were to be captured and sent to London to face trial, and likely the gallows. With the heads of the snake cut off, Gage believed the body of the rebellion would wither and die. After securing their Reveille targets in Lexington, the column would press on to Concord. There, they would destroy the military stores, rendering the provincial army powerless. The plan seemed foolproof. It was a classic military operation. Precise, swift, and overwhelming. The British regulars were the most professional army in the world. What could a disorganized rabble of farmers and shopkeepers possibly do to stop them? The officers finalized the details. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith would lead the main force, with Major John Pitcairn of the Royal Marines commanding the advance guard. They would cross the Charles River by boat to avoid the Patriot sentinels watching the Boston Neck, the only land route out of the city. Secrecy was paramount. The success of the entire mission hinged on the element of surprise. As the final preparations were made on the evening of April 18, 1775, an air of confidence filled the British headquarters. The soldiers polished their bayonets and checked their ammunition, unaware of the historic role they were about to play. They believed they were simply putting down a minor colonial uprising, enforcing the king's law. They had no idea they were about to march into the pages of history and start a war that would change the world forever. General Gage believed he had thought of everything. He had planned for the route, the targets, and the timing. But there was one critical factor he had dangerously underestimated: the resolve of the American Patriots and the effectiveness of their intelligence network. While the Redcoats planned in secret, other eyes were watching, and other plans were being made in the shadows of Boston's narrow streets. The British plan was about to unfold, but it would not go unchallenged. The colonists were ready to answer. Join us next time as we see how the Patriot spy network, including the legendary Paul Revere, springs into action to warn the countryside. The secret is out, and the race against time has begun. Thanks for watching, and if you're enjoying this series, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more. We'll see you in the next chapter. Welcome back to our journey through the American Revolution. Last time, we explored the simmering tensions in Boston. Today, we delve into the shadows, into a world of whispers and secret networks, and we meet the man at the very center of the web, Dr. Joseph Warren. Imagine Boston in April 1775. The city is a powder keg. British soldiers, the regulars, patrolled the streets, their redcoats a constant reminder of the Crown's authority. The air is thick with suspicion. Every colonist is watching, and every soldier is being watched. But who was turning this collective anxiety into actionable intelligence? That man was Dr. Joseph Warren. Warren wasn't just a physician. He was a leader of the Sons of Liberty and a master of intelligence. He was charismatic, respected, and moved through all circles of Boston society. He treated the poor in the North End and dined with the city's elite. He was the kind of man people trusted, the kind they confided in. And in a city on the brink of war, trust was the most valuable currency. His network of spies, known as the Mechanics, was an extraordinary group of everyday artisans and tradesmen. These were the blacksmiths, the silversmiths, the printers' men who worked with their hands and kept their ears to the ground. They saw everything. They heard the loose talk of British officers in taverns, noted the unusual preparations in the army barracks, and observed the movements of troops and supplies. Each piece of information, no matter how small, was funneled back to one man, Dr. Warren. In the days leading up to April 18th, the whispers grew louder. The British were planning something big. The elite grenadier and light infantry companies were being pulled from their regular duties. Longboats from the Royal Navy warships in the harbor were being secretly lowered and moored under the sterns of the vessels. For the casual observer, these might seem like routine military exercises, but for Warren and his network, they were pieces of a puzzle. The final, crucial piece of intelligence is a subject of historical debate, but it's one of the most compelling stories of the Revolution. Many believe the source was none other than Margaret Kemble Gage, the American-born wife of the British commander, General Thomas Gage. Was she a loyal wife torn by her love for her homeland? Did she, in a moment of conscience, secretly pass a warning to Dr. Warren, a man she knew and trusted as her physician? We may never know for certain, but we know this. On the evening of April 18th, Dr. Warren possessed the final confirmation he needed. The British weren't just conducting drills. They were preparing for a secret, nighttime march. Their targets were the Patriot leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock, who were hiding in Lexington, and the cache of colonial weapons and gunpowder stored in. The time for watching was over. The time for action had come. Warren knew he had to move fast. He sent for one of his most trusted couriers, a silversmith and a fellow son of liberty, a man whose name would soon become legendary. He sent for William Dawes first, sending him out by land over the Boston Neck. Then he summoned his primary rider. Picture the scene. A dimly lit room, the air heavy with the weight of impending conflict. Paul Revere Atibus, his heart likely pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Dr. Warren, his face etched with urgency, looks him straight in the eye. The moment is tense, historic. Warren's voice is low, firm, leaving no room for doubt. "Paul," he says, "the regulars are coming out tonight. Just 7 words. But they carried the fate of a nation. The regulars are coming out tonight. It was the confirmation of every fear, the start of a chain reaction that could not be stopped. Warren explained the plan. The British would cross the Charles River by boat to Cambridge, then march to Lexington and Concord. Secrecy was paramount. Speed was everything. Warren's instructions were clear. Revere was to ride to Lexington, to warn Adams and Hancock that they were the primary targets. He also needed to alert the countryside. The colonial militia, the Minutemen, had to be ready. They had to be mustered. This wasn't just about saving 2 men or a stash of weapons. This was about preserving the revolution itself. If the British could capture the movement's leaders and seize its arms in one swift blow, the rebellion might be crushed before it even truly began. Dr. Warren understood the stakes. His intelligence network had given the Patriots a crucial advantage. Time, but only if it was used wisely. As Paul Revere prepared for his famous ride, he carried with him more than just a message. He carried the culmination of months of dangerous, painstaking intelligence work. He was the point of the spear, but the spear had been forged by Dr. Joseph Warren and the countless, nameless patriots of his network. They were the eyes and ears of the revolution, operating in the shadows so that liberty could one day see the light. The loyalty between these men was absolute. They risked everything, their property, their freedom, their very lives for a cause. They believed in. When Warren told Revere, "The regulars are coming out," it wasn't a request. It was a call to duty, from one brother in the cause to another. And Revere, without hesitation, answered that call, stepping out into the darkness to light the spark of the American Revolution. Dr. Warren's role that night cannot be overstated. He was the central nervous system of the Patriot cause in Boston. He gathered the information, he analyzed the threat, and he activated the response. His quick thinking and the incredible bravery of his network turned a secret British operation into a warning that echoed through every village and farm in Middlesex County. The ride of Paul Revere is the story we all know, but it began with the quiet, determined intelligence of Dr. Josie Warren. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter of our story. The stage is now set for a night that will change the world forever. If you found this dive into the secret world of revolutionary intelligence fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what happens next. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think was Warren's source? Until next time, stay curious. Welcome back to our journey through the American Revolution. We've arrived at a pivotal moment, a scene etched into the very soul of American history. We are in Boston, on the cold, tense night of April 18th, 1775. Our setting is the Old North Church, its steeple reaching towards a dark, star-filled sky, a silent witness to the drama about to unfold. Inside, the air is thick with anticipation. 2 men, Sexton Robert Newman and Vestryman John Pulling, move with quiet urgency. They are not acting alone. They are part of a network of patriots, eyes and ears, for the Sons of Liberty, all waiting for the final word on the British Army's movements. Dr. Joseph Warren, a key leader of the resistance, has just confirmed the intelligence. The British regulars are on the move. But how? By land, marching across the narrow Boston Neck, or by sea, taking boats across the Charles River to Cambridge. The route they choose will determine the speed of their advance and the colonists' chance to prepare. This is where the plan, a simple yet ingenious piece of spycraft, comes into play. Paul Revere himself devised it. He knew he might be detained or delayed while trying to leave Boston. A backup was essential. He had arranged for a signal to be sent from the highest point in Boston, the steeple of the Old North Church, to his fellow riders waiting across the river in Charlestown. The signal was to be brilliantly simple. 1, if by land, and 2, if by sea. 1 lantern meant the British were marching out overland. 2 lanterns meant they were embarking on boats. Imagine the weight of this responsibility on Newman and Pulling. They are the keepers of the flame, the ones tasked with igniting the first spark of this great alarm. Robert Newman, the sexton, knew every creak and shadow of this church. It was his home, in a way. He lived just across the street. Climbing that steeple was a familiar task, but tonight it was different. Tonight, he wasn't just ringing bells. He was sounding an alarm for an entire country's future. With two way-loyal lanterns in hand, they begin their ascent. Up the winding, narrow stairs they go, each step echoing in the cavernous silence. They climb past the bell-ringing chamber, past the massive timbers that have held this structure for decades. The higher they go, the more the city of Boston unfolds below them through the dusty windows. It's a city under occupation, filled with soldiers and simmering with rebellion. Every shadow could hide a British patrol. Every distant shout could be the sound of discovery. The danger was immense. If caught, they would be arrested for treason. The penalty for treason was death by hanging. Every creak of a floorboard, every gust of wind rattling the windows, must have sent a jolt of fear through them. But their commitment to liberty was stronger than their fear. They were ordinary men, a church sexton and a vestryman, thrust into an extraordinary moment. Their actions that night would prove that courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. Finally, they reach the belfry, the highest point. The wind whistles through the openings, cold and sharp. From here, they can see across the dark, shimmering water of the Charles River to the shores of Charlestown. They know that somewhere over there, patriots are watching, their eyes fixed on this very steeple, waiting. The fate of the mission, and perhaps the fate of the towns of Lexington and Concord, rests on this signal being seen. They take a moment, a deep breath. Then, the first lantern is lit. Its flame flickers, a tiny point of light against the immense darkness. Then, the second, two golden glows, cutting through the blackness of the night. John Pooling carefully hangs them in the arched window of the steeple, facing Charlestown. For just a few moments, they hold them there, long enough to be seen, but not so long as to attract the attention of the British troops patrolling the streets below or the sailors aboard the HMS Somerset, a massive British warship anchored right in the harbor. Those two lights are more than just a signal. They are a profound symbol. They are light in the darkness, a defiant declaration that even in a city under military rule, the spirit of freedom could not be extinguished. They are the first visible spark of the American Revolution, a silent message that would soon erupt into the shot heard round the world. Across the river, the signal is received. The network is activated. Riders prepare to gallop into the countryside, their hoofbeats becoming the drumbeat of a new nation. The mission is complete. Newman and Pooling extinguish the lanterns and make their perilous descent. Newman would later slip out a back window of the church and quietly make his way home, while Pooling escaped Boston by boat. Their part in the night's drama was over, but the chain reaction they started had just begun. Paul Revere was already on his own journey, rowing stealthily past the Somerset, his own story of the midnight ride about to unfold. But it was the quiet courage of two men in a church steeple with two simple lanterns that first sent the message. The time for waiting was over. The fight for liberty had begun. This iconic scene, immortalized in Longfellow's poem, reminds us that history is often shaped not just by famous generals and politicians, but by ordinary citizens who, when faced with a critical moment, choose to act with extraordinary bravery. The two lanterns in the Old North Church stand as a timeless testament to the power of a simple act of defiance and the enduring light of freedom. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. If you're finding this series insightful and want to follow the story of the Revolution, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring these pivotal moments in history to life. We'll see you next time as the midnight riders thunder through the countryside. The city lights of Boston are a distant glimmer now, swallowed by the immense darkness of the April night. It's just past 10 o'clock on April 18th, 1775. The air is sharp and cold against my face, carrying the damp scent of the nearby Charles River. Beneath me, I can feel the steady, powerful muscles of Brown Beauty, my trusted mare. Her breath comes in misty plumes, her ears twitching, alert to every sound in the silent landscape. She knows, just as I do, that this is no ordinary night ride. We've just crossed the river, leaving the occupied city behind. Every shadow seems to hold a threat. Every rustle of leaves could be a British patrol. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat matching the rhythm of Brown Beauty's hooves on the dirt path. The mission is clear, etched into my mind. Ride to Lexington, warned Samuel Adams and John Hancock. The regulars are coming. They are coming by sea, and their target is not just the colonial munitions stored in but the very heart of our burgeoning revolution. The weight of this knowledge is a heavy cloak. It's a race against time, a desperate gamble. Every stride Brown Beauty takes is a step toward liberty or a step closer to capture. I lean forward, whispering words of encouragement into her ear, my voice a low murmur against the rush of the wind. Steady, girl. Fast. Now, we are one entity, horse and rider. A single arrow shot into the heart of the night, carrying a message that will change the course of history. We move past the silent farmhouses and sleeping villages of Charlestown and into the countryside. The moon is a slender sliver, offering little light. We are a ghost, a fleeting shadow on the road to Medford. At each house I dare to approach, I rein in Brown Beauty, her hooves dancing nervously on the packed earth. I keep my voice low, a harsh, urgent whisper at the windows of sleeping patriots. The regulars are out. The regulars are coming. Some doors open a crack, revealing faces pale with sleep and then stark with alarm. A lantern is lit. A hushed, frantic conversation follows. Other riders are dispatched, spreading the alarm like ripples in a pond. My single message multiplying into a chorus of warning across the Massachusetts countryside. There's no time for long farewells or detailed explanations. The urgency is a fire in my blood. A quick nod, a shared look of grim understanding, and I am gone again, plunging back into the consuming darkness. Brown Beauty's pace is relentless. Her powerful legs devour the miles. The road stretches on, a dark ribbon unfurling before us. The sound of her hooves is a constant, rhythmic thunder in the quiet of the night. It's the sound of defiance. It's the sound of a warning. It's the sound of a country waking up. I can feel the tension in every muscle, my eyes straining to pierce the gloom, watching for the glint of a bayonet or the outline of a red-coated soldier. I pass through Medford, 10 Menotomy, which we now know as Arlington. In Medford, I make a crucial stop, waking the captain of the Minutemen. The news hits him like a physical blow, but his resolve hardens in an instant. He assures me the town's bells will ring summoning the militia. The network is working. The word is spreading, but Lexington is still miles away, and I know the main body of British troops is not far behind. The wind whips at my cloak, trying to steal the breath from my lungs. My hands are numb on the reins, but I dare not slow down. This ride is more than just a delivery of a message. It is a declaration. It's a statement that we will not be caught sleeping. We will not be caught unaware. We will be ready. Every beat of Brown Beauty's hooves on the frozen ground is a syllable in the word freedom. I think of my family back in Boston, of the Sons of Liberty, of the ordinary men and women farmers, blacksmiths, merchants who will be roused from their beds tonight. They will grab their muskets and powder horns, kiss their families goodbye, and march toward the sound of the alarm bells. They are relying on this message. They are relying on me. The thought both terrifies and strengthens me. The ride is a lonely one, filled with the sounds of the night and the pounding of my own pulse. The wind whistles past my ears, carrying whispered fears and hopeful prayers. Is that the sound of another rider behind me? An ally, or a pursuer? I urge Brown Beauty on, pushing her to her limit. We are a single, desperate pulse of energy moving through the sleeping land. The fate of the coming day, and perhaps the fate of America itself, rests on us reaching Lexington in time. As we near the outskirts of Lexington, a sense of grim anticipation settles over me. This is it. The final stretch. The darkness is still absolute, but I can feel a change in the air. A tension. The quiet here feels different. Not the quiet of sleep, but the quiet of waiting. I can almost hear the collective breath being held by the patriots who are gathered, waiting for confirmation of the danger they already sense is near. My ride is almost over, but the long night for the colonies is just beginning. The ride is just the prelude. The real test is yet to come, with the rising of the sun. Thank you for joining me on this historic journey. If you've been moved by this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more chapters from our nation's past. Your support helps us keep these vital stories alive. Have you ever pictured Paul Revere galloping through the dark, shouting at the top of his lungs, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" It's a powerful image, right? A lone hero, a thundering horse, and a cry that would ignite a revolution. It's the story we've all heard, the one etched into the very fabric of American history. But what if I told you that iconic phrase, the one we all know, is probably not what he said at all? Welcome back to our journey through the American Revolution. Today, we're diving into Chapter 9. The message? We're going to unpack that legendary midnight ride, separate the hard facts from the romanticized fiction, and understand the true purpose and emotion behind that frantic, moonlit dash. So, saddle up, because we're about to ride alongside Paul Revere and discover what really happened on that fateful night of April 18th, 1775. Let's start by debunking the myth. The phrase, "The British are coming," is catchy, dramatic, and makes for a great movie line. It was actually popularized over 80 years after the event by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in his famous poem, Paul Revere's Ride. But in 1775, shouting that phrase would have been confusing, and frankly, a bit nonsensical. Why? Because at that time, most colonists still considered themselves British subjects. They were Englishmen, fighting for their rights as Englishmen. Shouting, "The British are coming," would be like shouting, "We are coming." It just doesn't make sense. So, what did he likely say? Historical accounts and common sense suggest his warning was far more specific and strategic. He would have galloped into towns like Lexington and Concord, reining in his horse and yelling something like, "The regulars are out," or "The regulars are coming out." Now, the regulars, that was the common term for the full-time, professional British soldiers stationed in Boston. They were the ones in the bright red coats, the King's professional army. This message was instantly understood. It wasn't about a foreign invasion. It was about the King's troops, the government's army, Makin Amobe. This distinction is crucial. It changes the entire context of the alarm. It wasn't a cry of national identity against a foreign power. Not yet, anyway. It was an internal alert system, a signal that the simmering political conflict with the Crown-esque government in Boston was about to boil over into open, armed conflict. The message wasn't just for everyone. It was a targeted alert. Revere, along with his fellow writers William Dawes and Samuel Prescott, had a very specific mission. Their primary goal was to warn two key figures of the Patriot cause, Samuel Adams and John Hancock. These men were staying in Lexington, and the British had orders to arrest them. They were seen as the chief instigators of the rebellion, the troublemakers in chief. Losing them would have been a devastating blow to the Patriot movement. So, the first and most critical stop was to ensure Hancock and Adams could escape before the regulars arrived. Imagine the urgency as Revere pounded on the door of the Clark house where they were staying. The fate of the revolution's leadership hung in the balance. But the mission didn't end there. The second, equally vital purpose was to activate the colonial militia. This wasn't just a general cry into the night. This was a sophisticated, prearranged network. As Revere and the others rode, they were triggering a chain reaction. Their shouts were meant for the captains of the local Minutemen companies, militias that had been training for months, ready to assemble at a minute's notice. Think of it like a revolutionary or a telephone tree. Revere warns a town leader, who then sends out other riders to the surrounding farms and villages. Church bells would begin to toll, not for Sunday service, but as a prearranged signal of alarm. Gunshots would echo in the distance, another signal to grab your musket and head to the town green. The message, "The regulars are out," was the spark that lit a whole network of fuses, spreading the alarm across the Massachusetts countryside with incredible speed. It was a testament to the colonists' organization, their shared purpose, and their readiness to defend their communities. Now, let's talk about the emotion of that night. It's easy to see it as pure heroism, but we have to remember the intense fear and uncertainty that gripped everyone. Imagine being woken from a deep sleep by frantic shouting and the sound of a galloping horse. You hear the words, "The regulars are out." What does that mean? It means a powerful, disciplined army is marching towards your home in the dead of night. For these farmers, blacksmiths, and merchants, this wasn't an abstract political debate anymore. This was real. The king's soldiers, armed with bayonets, were coming. Are they coming to arrest your leaders? To confiscate your weapons? To occupy your town? The fear must have been palpable. The fear of violence. The fear for their families. The fear of losing everything they had built. It was a terrifying moment. A leap into a dark and unknown future. But alongside that fear, there was another powerful emotion. A profound sense of unity and resolve. The riders weren't just spreading fear, they were calling upon a shared commitment. For months, these communities had been discussing their rights, protesting against taxes, and organizing in secret. They had made a pact with each other. They had promised to stand together against what they saw as tyranny. When that alarm came, it was a call to honor that pact. As men grabbed their muskets and kissed their families goodbye, they were acting on a powerful sense of unity. They were neighbors, friends, and countrymen standing shoulder to shoulder. The fear was real, but the determination to act, to protect their homes and their liberties, was stronger. That night wasn't just about one man on a horse. It was about thousands of individuals making a brave choice, transforming from ordinary subjects into defiant patriots. The urgency of the message forged an instant, powerful bond. So, the true message of that night was far more nuanced and powerful than a simple shout of "the British are coming." It was a specific, strategic alert. The regulars are out. Its purpose was twofold. To save the revolution's leaders, Adams and Hancock, and to activate the entire colonial militia network. And the emotions it stirred were a potent mix of heart-pounding fear and unwavering unity. It was this combination that made the ride so successful. By the time the British regulars reached Lexington, they weren't marching into a sleeping countryside. They were met by a small but determined band of militiamen standing on the village green. The alarm had worked. The message had been delivered. And as the sun rose on April 19th, 1775, the quiet night exploded into the shot heard round the world, marking the beginning of the American War for Independence. The ride was over, but the revolution had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into one of history's most pivotal moments. It's a story that reminds us how a clear message, delivered with urgency and purpose, can change the course of history. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more chapters from our shared past. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below with your thoughts or questions. Until next time, stay curious. When you think of the midnight ride, one name probably springs to mind. Paul Revere, a solitary hero, galloping through the moonlit Massachusetts countryside. His voice a clarion call against the silent night. The British are coming. It's a powerful image, immortalized in poetry and legend. But, like many legends, it's only part of the story. The truth is far more complex, far more collaborative, and, in many ways, far more inspiring. This isn't just the story of one man. It's the story of a network, a symphony of writers and signals that set the stage for a revolution. This is the network in action. Our story picks back up in the tense, pregnant hours of April 19th, 1775. Paul Revere has just slipped past the British warship HMS Somerset and landed in Charlestown. His primary mission, given to him by Dr. Joseph Warren, was to reach Lexington and warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock that British troops were on the march, likely to arrest them. He secured a horse from Deacon John Larkin, a sturdy mare named Brown Beauty, and began his famous ride. But even before Revere set off, the network was already buzzing. The plan for this night was never about a single rider. It was about redundancy, about ensuring the message got through no matter what. Dr. Warren knew the British would be watching the main routes, especially the one Revere was taking. So, he dispatched a second rider, a tanner named William Dawes, on a completely different path. Dawes' journey is often overshadowed by Revere's, but it was no less crucial and arguably more challenging. While Revere took the faster, more direct route by water and then road, Dawes had to travel the longer, land-based route over the Boston Neck. This narrow strip of land was heavily guarded by British sentries. Dawes, a skilled actor and mimic, used his wits to his advantage. He blended in with other travelers, perhaps even feigning drunkenness or affecting the accent of a local farmer to slip past the checkpoints. His slow, steady journey through towns like Roxbury, Brookline, and Cambridge was the vital backup plan. If Revere was captured, Dawes was the insurance policy. Meanwhile, Revere was galloping toward Lexington. His ride wasn't a mad dash through empty fields. He was a messenger with a specific task: to activate a pre-established system. In every town he passed through Medford, Menotomy, which is now Arlington, he didn't just shout into the void. He rode directly to the homes of local militia captains and community leaders, the keynotes in the colonial communication network. These were men he knew, men who had been preparing for this very moment. He would deliver the news, and they, in turn, would send out their own riders, ringing church bells and firing alarm muskets to awaken the Minutemen. Imagine it like a modern-day phone tree, but with horses and church bells. Revere was the initial spark, but the fire spread because hundreds of others were ready to carry the flame. As Revere rode on, you could trace the alarm spreading out from his path like ripples in a pond. Lights began to flicker on in farmhouses. The distant pop of a musket would be answered by another, and then another, a chain reaction of defiance echoing across the hills. Revere reached Lexington around midnight, successfully delivering his warning to Hancock and Adams, who were staying at the Clark Hancock house. Shortly after, William Dawes arrived, having completed his own arduous journey. 2 messengers, 2 different routes, 1 successful outcome. But their night was far from over. Their orders were not just to warn Lexington, but also to proceed to where the colonists had stockpiled a massive cache of weapons, gunpowder, and cannons. This was the true prize the British were after. As they set out from Lexington, they were joined by a third man, a young doctor named Samuel Prescott. And here, the story takes another crucial turn. Prescott wasn't part of the original plan. He was a local Concord resident who had been in Lexington visiting his fiancée, Lydia Mujican. He was what we might call a local asset, a chance encounter that proved to be the most important of the night. As a resident, he knew the terrain, the back roads, the trails, the shortcuts better than either Revere or Dawes. He willingly joined their mission, transforming the duo into a trio. The 3 rode together toward Concord, continuing to spread the alarm along the way. But their luck was about to run out. Halfway between Lexington and Concord, they rode straight into a British patrol. The confrontation was sudden. Revere, riding in front, shouted to his companions and wheeled his horse around, attempting to escape into a nearby pasture. The British soldiers were ready. They swarmed him, and at gunpoint, Paul Revere's famous ride came to an abrupt end. He was captured. William Dawes also reacted quickly. He spurred his horse off the road, shouting, "Halloo, boys, I've got 2 of 'em," in an attempt to trick the patrol into thinking they were riding into an ambush. In the confusion, his horse reared and threw him, but he managed to escape on foot into the woods, though he was now horseless and unable to complete the journey to Concord. 2 riders down. The message to Concord, the most critical part of the mission, now rested solely on the shoulders of the one man who was uneven supposed to be there, Dr. Samuel Prescott. Because he was a local, he knew exactly what to do. While the British were focused on Revere, Prescott spurred his horse, jumped a stone wall, and vanished into the dark woods, taking a path the British soldiers would never find. He outran his pursuers and successfully made it to Concord. It was Prescott, not Revere, who delivered the final, urgent warning to the people of Concord. It was Prescott who ensured the Minutemen there were ready. He then continued riding west to the town of Acton and beyond, spreading the alarm even further. His local knowledge and quick thinking saved the mission from total failure. When the British regulars, the Redcoats, finally marched into Lexington at dawn, they weren't met with sleeping, unsuspecting villagers. They were met by Captain John Parker and about 77 armed colonial militia, standing defiantly on the town green. The alarm had worked. After the tragic shot heard round the world and the skirmish that followed, the British continued their march to Concord. But when they arrived, they found a ghost town. Thanks to Prescott's warning, The colonists had spent the crucial hours before dawn moving and hiding the vast majority of the military supplies. The cannons were buried in freshly plowed fields. Barrels of gunpowder were hidden in attics and cellars. The British found and destroyed very little of consequence. Their primary objective was a failure, and as they began their long, humiliating march back to Boston, they discovered the true power of the network they had awakened. From behind every stone wall, every tree, every farmhouse, militia from all the surrounding towns, saluted by Revere, Dawes, Prescott, and the dozens of other unnamed riders converged on the road. The British column was harassed and attacked for 16 miles. It was a hornet's nest. The professional army was decimated by a citizen militia that seemed to materialize out of the very landscape. So, when we remember the midnight ride, let's expand the frame. Let's see the whole picture. Paul Revere was a hero, without a doubt. His courage and determination were essential, but he was one critical thread in a much larger tapestry. There was William Dawes, the resourceful actor who took the long way round. There was Samuel Prescott, the young doctor whose local knowledge saved the day. And there were the countless, nameless riders, the town captains, the church sextons who rang the bells, and the farmers who left their beds to answer the call. The true hero of April 19th, 1775, wasn't a single man. It was the network. It was the idea of collective action, of shared responsibility, of ordinary people organized and ready to act for a common cause. It's a testament to the power of community and communication, and that is a story even more powerful than the legend of a lone rider. It's the story of how a nation began. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments which part of this vast network you found most surprising. We'll see you in the next chapter. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey. Tonight, we plunge into one of the most iconic moments in American history, a story of courage, urgency, and a desperate ride against time. This is Chapter 11, Through the Night. The air is thick with anticipation. It's just past 11 o'clock on April 18th, 1775. Paul Revere, having narrowly escaped capture while crossing the Charles River, now stands on the Charlestown shore. His horse, a powerful mare named Brown Beauty, shifts restlessly beneath him. The mission is clear, but the path is fraught with peril. He has to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock that the British regulars are coming for them. And beyond that, he must awaken the entire countryside. With a final check of his saddle and a steadying breath, Revere spurs his horse into a gallop. The moon, a silver crescent in the dark sky, casts long, dancing shadows that seem to hide 1,000 dangers. Every rustle of leaves, every distant dog bark, sends a jolt of adrenaline through him. The hoofbeats are a frantic drumbeat against the silent earth, a rhythm of rebellion echoing through the night. Charlestown Neck is the first major obstacle. The narrow strip of land is notorious for British patrols. Revere pulls back on the reins, slowing to a trot, his eyes scanning the darkness. Ace spots them the silhouettes of 2 British officers on horseback. Right in his path, there's no turning back. Revere wheels his horse abruptly, veering off the main road and onto a path leading toward Medford. The officers give chase immediately. It's a race, pure and simple. Hoofbeats thunder behind him. Closer, closer. Revere pushes Brown Beauty harder, urging her on, feeling the powerful muscles of the horse beneath him, straining with every stride. The path is treacherous, uneven, and dark. But the mare is sure-footed. He gains a few precious yards, then a few more. Looking back, he sees his pursuers struggling with the rough terrain. He has escaped. But the close call is a stark reminder of the danger that lies ahead on every mile of this journey. The night has only just begun. He reaches Medford, the first town on his route. The place is asleep, shrouded in a peaceful quiet that feels worlds away from the conflict brewing in Boston. But this peace is a fragile illusion, and Revere is here to shatter it. He doesn't slow down. He gallops through the main street, a phantom rider shouting into the darkness. The regulars are coming out. The regulars are coming out. His voice, raw and urgent, slices through the stillness. He pounds on the door of Captain Isaac Hall, the leader of the Medford Minutemen. A window slides open. A sleepy face appears. The message is delivered in a breathless rush, a torrent of words that ignites the town. Lights begin to flicker on in house after house, like a chain reaction of defiance. Doors creak open. Men, grabbing their muskets, spill into the streets, their faces grim with determination. The alarm is spreading. Leaving Medford behind, Revere thunders toward the next town, Menotomy, known today as Arlington. The road stretches on, a dark ribbon winding through farmland and woods. He doesn't ride alone for long. The alarm has taken on a life of its own. Auto riders inspired by his warning are now galloping on different paths, carrying the message deeper into the countryside. Church bells begin to peal, their solemn, urgent tones rolling across the hills, a call to arms that will not be ignored. It's a symphony of rebellion, conducted by a lone silversmith on a borrowed horse. Every door he passes, every tavern he shouts at, is another link in the chain of communication. He's not just a messenger. He's an inspiration, a symbol of the colony's unified resolve. The journey is grueling. The constant pace, the chilling night air, the gnawing tension, it all takes a toll. But Revere doesn't falter. He knows that every second counts. The lives of Adams and Hancock, and indeed the fate of the entire revolutionary movement, could depend on his speed. He thinks of the men he's waking up, farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, ordinary men who, because of this night, will soon become soldiers. He is their Paul Revere, their herald of danger, their call to duty. The landscape flies by in a blur of trees and stone walls. The moon plays hide-and-seek behind the clouds, plunging the road into absolute blackness one moment, then revealing it in ghostly light the next. As he approaches Menotomy, the sounds of the night change. It's no longer just his own horse's hooves. He hears the distant echo of other riders, the murmur of voices, the metallic click of muskets being prepared. The countryside is awake. It is alert. It is ready. This is no longer a solitary ride. It's the beginning of a mobilization. He has successfully woven a web of warning across the land. The British plan for a secret, surprise march has been blown wide open. When their red-coated soldiers march down this very road in a few hours, they will not find a sleeping, unsuspecting populace. They will find an armed and waiting militia, ready to defend their homes and their liberty. Revere's ride through the night is more than just a physical journey. It's a transformation. He started as a single man on a desperate mission, and by the time he reaches the outskirts of Lexington, he has become the spark that lit a fire. The tension is at its peak. The cinematic quality of this moment in history is undeniable. The lone hero, the race against time, the fate of a nation hanging in the balance. But unlike a movie, Tease was real. The fear was real. The danger was real, and the courage was extraordinary. He has ridden through Charlestown, Medford, and Menotomy, leaving a trail of awakened patriots in his wake. He has done what he set out to do. The alarm has been sounded. The night is still young, and Revere's journey is not yet over. Ahead lies Lexington, where Adams and Hancock are waiting, and beyond that, Concord, where the militia's military supplies are stored. The most dangerous part of his ride is still to come. But as he gallops on, the sounds of the awakening countryside at his back, he carries with him the knowledge that he is no longer alone. An army is rising from its sleep, ready to meet the dawn, and ready to meet the British. The ride through the night has set the stage for the battle that will change the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this thrilling part of our story. The events of this single night are a testament to the power of communication and the bravery of individuals. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more chapters of this incredible history. We love having you here, and your support means the world. We'll see you next time as we ride into Lexington with Paul Revere. Hello, history lovers, and welcome back to our deep dive into the American Revolution. Today, we're tackling Chapter 12, Danger on the Road, a chapter filled with tension, high stakes, chases, and a pivotal moment for one of our key figures. So, grab your tricorn hats, and let's ride back into the fateful night of April 18th, 1775 as we left off. Paul Revere and William Dawes had successfully warned John Hancock and Samuel Adams in Lexington. Their mission, however, was far from over. Their next destination was Concord, to ensure the colonial militia there was ready and the military supplies were secured. But the roads were no longer just dark and quiet. They were now crawling with danger. The British High Command, realizing the element of surprise was slipping away, had dispatched patrols across the countryside. Their specific orders to intercept any and all express riders to couriers of the rebellion. These weren't just random soldiers. They were mounted officers, skilled horsemen, tasked with cutting the lines of communication that held the colonial resistance together. Every shadow could be a threat, every sound a potential enemy. As Revere and Dawes galloped out of Lexington, they were joined by a third rider, a young doctor named Samuel Prescott. Prescott was a son of liberty from Concord, and he knew the local terrain like the back of his hand. His presence was a stroke of luck, or so it seemed. The trio rode on, their horses' hooves thundering a rhythm of urgency against the dirt road. They were a team now, united in their purpose. But they were riding straight into a web. The British patrols were strategically positioned, creating a net to catch riders just like them. The air was thick with the feeling that something was about to happen. They were no longer just spreading a warning. They were actively being hunted. The encounter, when it came, was sudden and terrifying. As they neared the town of Lincoln, a group of British officers appeared from the shadows, blocking the road ahead. "Halt!" they shouted, their pistols glinting in the moonlight. There was no time to think, only to react. The three riders spurred their horses in different directions, hoping to split up their pursuers and increase the chances of at least one of them getting through. William Dawes, in a moment of panic or perhaps cleverness, wheeled his horse hard and galloped towards a nearby farmhouse. He shouted loudly, as if calling for reinforcements. "I've got two of them. Surround them." The ruse worked. The British officers pursuing him, fearing they were riding into an ambush, pulled back, and Dawes, in the confusion, was thrown from his horse but managed to escape on foot into the woods. Dr. Prescott, the local boy, proved his worth. He knew the fields and forests better than any British officer. He expertly jumped his horse over a low stone wall and disappeared into the darkness of the countryside, successfully evading capture. He would be the one to carry the alarm all the way to Concord, fulfilling the mission's ultimate objective. But what about Paul Revere? The most famous of the riders found himself in the most perilous situation. He'd attempted to break through the patrol by riding into a pasture, but it was a trap. More officers were waiting, and he quickly found himself surrounded. With pistols aimed at his head, he had no choice but to surrender. The legendary midnight ride, for Paul Revere, had come to an abrupt and dangerous end. Captured and held at gunpoint, Revere was now a prisoner of the very men he sought to undermine. The British officers immediately began to interrogate him. Who was he? Where was he going? What was his message? Revere, ever the clever silversmith, was defiant. He told them his name and admitted he had been sent to warn the country of the British troops' advance. He even boldly told them that their mission to capture Hancock and Adams in Lexington had already failed, and that the entire countryside was being alarmed. He wasn't just a captive. He was still trying to influence events, using information as his weapon. He described the signals from the Old North Church and warned that hundreds of militia were now assembling. His words were a mix of truth and bravado, designed to create confusion and sow doubt in the minds of his captors. The British officers were in a difficult position. Revere's story was alarming. If the countryside was indeed rising, their small patrol was in danger of being overwhelmed. As they escorted Revere and other captured locals back towards Lexington, they heard a volley of gunfire ring out in the distance. It was the sound of the Lexington militia engaging with the British regulars on the town green. The battle had begun. The sound confirmed Revere's warnings. The officers realized their mission of secrecy was over, and their own safety was now the priority. They decided Revere's horse was more valuable than the man himself. They confiscated his trusty mare, a horse he had borrowed for the ride, and left him on the road, a prisoner no more, but now on foot and miles from safety. Freed but horseless, Paul Revere was not one to give up. His primary concern was still the safety of Hancock and Adams, and more importantly, a trunk full of their incriminating papers that had been left behind at the Buckman Tavern in Lexington. The battle was raging on the green, but Revere knew those documents could be used as evidence of treason, a death sentence for the two Patriot leaders. He made his way on foot, cautiously, back towards the center of the conflict. It's an incredible image. The famous writer, having been captured and released, now walking back into the very firefight he had helped to start, all to secure a box of papers. This act speaks volumes about his dedication and his understanding of what was truly at stake. As he approached Lexington Green, the chaos was absolute. The smoke of black powder filled the air. The crack of muskets was deafening, and the first casualties of the American Revolutionary War lay on the ground. Revere, along with one of Hancock's clerks, dashed into the tavern, grabbed the heavy trunk, and carried it through the pandemonium of the ongoing skirmish. They moved it to a safer location, ensuring that the evidence against the Patriot leaders would not fall into British hands. His mission, in a way, had come full circle. He had warned Hancock and Adams, vain captured, and returned just in time to save their political lives. His ride was over, but his role in the day's dramatic events was not. He had transitioned from a messenger to a participant in the first battle of the War for Independence. And that's where we'll leave the story for today. Revere is safe. The alarm has been successfully spread to Concord, thanks to Dr. Prescott. And the first shots have been fired at Lexington. The danger on the road proved real, but the spirit of the rebellion proved stronger. The events of this single night set in motion a conflict that would change the world forever. It's a testament to the courage of ordinary people like Revere, Dawes, and Prescott, who are willing to risk everything for the cause of liberty. What a chapter, full of suspense and historical significance. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history. I hope you found this chapter as thrilling as I did. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And do not forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we'll cover the shot heard round the world and the Battle of Concord. Your support means the world to me and helps keep this channel going. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey through the American Revolution. Last time, we left Paul Revere galloping through the night, a lone rider carrying a message that would change the course of history. Tonight, we ride with him into the jaws of the lion itself. This is Chapter 13, The Capture. The moon, which had been Revere's faithful guide, suddenly disappeared behind a thick bank of clouds. The road ahead became a ribbon of black, treacherous, and uncertain. It was in this disorienting darkness that Revere rode straight into an ambush. Out from the shadows, British officers on horseback emerged, their pistols glinting in the faint starlight. "Halt," one of them commanded, his voice sharp and cold. Revere was surrounded. The midnight ride, it seemed, had come to an abrupt and disastrous end. He was forced to dismount, his horse taken from him. The officers began their interrogation immediately, their questions rapid-fire and laced with threats. Who are you? Where are you from? Where are you going? They searched him, looking for letters, for any tangible proof of his mission. But Revere was carrying no documents. His message was etched in his memory, a secret they couldn't physically seize. One officer, grown impatient, put a pistol to Revere's head, threatening to pull the trigger if he didn't talk. The click of the hammer cocking was a sound sharp enough to cut the night air. This was the moment of truth. Panic could have easily taken hold. A single wrong word, a tremor in his voice, could have been his undoing. But Paul Revere was not just a silversmith or an engraver. He was a master of intelligence, and, as it turned out, a man of incredible nerve. Instead of pleading or showing fear, he looked the officer in the eye. His voice was steady, calm, and carried a weight of certainty that was entirely feigned. He told them his name was Revere. He told them he had been out alarming the countryside, from Boston to Lexington, warning of the British regulars' advance. This was a bold, almost reckless admission, but it was part of a calculated bluff. He wasn't just confessing, he was setting a trap. The officers scoffed, thinking him a fool for admitting his role. But then Revere delivered the message. He leaned in slightly, as if sharing a confidential piece of information. He told them that their mission to capture Sam Adams and John Hancock was already a failure. The alarm had been raised, he explained, and the country was flying to arms. He then casually mentioned that the town of Lexington was on high alert, and that as many as 500 armed militiamen were at that very moment gathering on the Lexington Green, waiting for the British troops to arrive. Imagine the scene. A lone, unarmed man, surrounded by a patrol of armed British officers, essentially telling them they were riding into a massive ambush. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of 500 colonial militiamen, angry and armed, waiting for them just up the road was a chilling prospect. Was this man bluffing, or was he telling the truth? His calmness, his directness, it was unnerving. He wasn't acting like a captured spy. He was acting like a herald delivering an ultimatum. The psychological game was working. Doubt began to creep into the officers' minds. They had expected to find a sleeping countryside, not one that was awake, armed, and waiting for them. The sound of a distant volley of gunfire likely, the Lexington militia, clearing their muskets, suddenly ripped through the night. To the already spooked British patrol, it sounded like the confirmation of Revere'S story. The battle had already begun. Their small patrol was now in imminent danger of being cut off and overwhelmed. The lead officer, Major Mitchell, made a decision. This lone prisoner was no longer their primary concern. Their own safety and the success of their main column were now at stake. Holding on to Revere was a risk they couldn't afford. In a swift turn of events, they decided to release him. But they kept his valuable horse, a fine mare named Brown Beauty that had served him so well. They left him standing alone on the road, horseless and miles from his destination, and galloped off to warn their own commander of the Hornet's Nest. They believed awaited them in Lexington. Paul Revere, standing in the middle of the dark road, had done the impossible. He had been captured, interrogated at gunpoint, and had not only survived but had turned the tables on his captors. He used their own fears and assumptions against them, planting a seed of doubt that grew into genuine alarm. He had bluffed his way to freedom. Though he had lost his horse, he had won a crucial victory. The message had been delivered to Lexington before his capture, and now, thanks to his incredible composure, the British advance would proceed with caution and fear, believing a much larger force than actually existed was waiting for them. Revere, now on foot, made his way through the dark fields, and pursued his eventually reaching the safety of the Clark parsonage in Lexington, just as the first light of dawn was breaking. He arrived just in time to witness the fateful confrontation on Lexington Green, the shot heard round the world that would ignite the flames of the American Revolution. His ride was over, but his legacy was just beginning. Through courage, quick thinking, and a bluff of epic proportions, Paul Revere had ensured that the spark of liberty would not be extinguished in the night. Thank you so much for joining us for this chapter. The story of Revere's capture is a testament to the fact that sometimes the sharpest weapon in a conflict is a clever mind and a steady nerve. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. We love hearing from you, so please share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the pivotal moments of history. In our last chapter, we left our heroes, Paul Revere and William Dawes, in a precarious situation, captured by a British patrol on the road to Concord. It was a heart-stopping moment, a cliffhanger where it seemed the mission, the urgent warning to the militia, might fail. The fate of the revolution hung precariously in the balance. But history, as we know, is rarely the story of just one or two individuals. It's a grand, interwoven tapestry of countless threads, and on that fateful night, another thread was about to shine. As Revere and Dawes were being interrogated, their companion, a young doctor named Samuel Prescott, did something extraordinary. He saw his chance. A fleeting moment of distraction among the British soldiers. With incredible courage and agility, he spurred his horse, broke through the patrol line, and galloped away into the darkness. The soldiers fired after him, the sound of their muskets cracking through the night, but Prescott was gone, swallowed by the woods and the shadows, while Dawes also managed to escape shortly after. He was unfortunately unhorsed and had to turn back. Revere, the most famous of the riders, was now a captive. But the mission was not over. In fact, it was just entering its most critical phase. This is the part of the story that often gets overlooked, but it's arguably one of the most important. Prescott wasn't just fleeing for his life. He was racing against time. carrying the vital message that Revere could no longer deliver. He knew the back roads, the hidden paths, and the shortcuts that only a local would. He wasn't just a rider, he was a guide, perfectly suited for this moment. He was the right man, in the right place, at the exact right time. He rode with a singular purpose. Concord. Every beat of his horse's hooves on the dirt road was a drumbeat for liberty. He wasn't just carrying a message, he was carrying the hopes of a nascent nation. He reached Concord and delivered the urgent warning. The British were coming, not just coming, but coming in force, with orders to seize the malicious arsenal of weapons and gunpowder. The alarm bells began to ring, their clanging notes cutting through the pre-dawn stillness, a symphony of defiance. But Prescott didn't stop there. He understood the gravity of the situation. It wasn't enough to warn just one town. He continued riding, spreading the alarm to the surrounding areas, including the town of Acton. Think about that for a moment. He had just escaped capture. His life had been in immediate danger, yet his first thought wasn't self-preservation. It was to see the mission through to its absolute completion. He was passing the torch, ensuring the flame of rebellion wouldn't be extinguished. This brings us to a powerful and enduring lesson from that night. One person can be stopped. A patrol can capture a rider. A horse can stumble. A message can be entered. But an idea, a powerful, unifying idea like freedom, that cannot be captured. It cannot be silenced. It's like a river. If you dam it in one place, it will find another way to flow, growing stronger and more determined. Revere's capture was a setback, but it wasn't the end. The idea he represented was too big, too powerful, to be contained within the grasp of a single British patrol. The ride of Paul Revere is iconic, and for a good reason. But the full story is even more inspiring. It's a story of a team, a network of patriots working together. It's the story of William Dawes taking a different, longer route. And it's the story of Samuel Prescott, the young doctor who picked up the fallen torch and carried it to the finish line. He wasn't just a backup. He was the crucial final link in a chain of events that would change the world forever. The symbolism is impossible to miss. Revere lit the spark, but the fire of revolution was fanned by many hands. The torch of liberty was passed from one patriot to another, a relay race against tyranny. When one runner fell, another was there to pick up the baton and continue the race. Prescott's ride symbolizes the resilience, the adaptability, and the deep-seated spirit of the American cause. It wasn't about a single hero. It was about a collective will, a shared dream that was larger than any one person. Thanks to Prescott's completion of the mission, the Minutemen of Concord and the surrounding towns were ready. When the British regulars marched into Concord later that morning, they weren't met by a sleepy, unprepared town. They were met by determined, armed colonists, standing shoulder to shoulder on the Old North Bridge. The shot heard round the world was about to be fired, and it was made possible by the courage of riders who refused to let the message die in the dark. So, as we close this chapter, let's remember not just the famous name, but the entire network of courage. Let's remember Samuel Prescott, the man who finished the ride. His story teaches us that even when our heroes face obstacles, the mission, the idea, can and will endure. It is a testament to the power of a united front, and a powerful reminder that history is often made by those whose names we do not always hear, but whose actions echo through the ages. Thank you so much for joining me for this part of the story. It's these deeper dives that truly bring history to life, don't you think? If you found this chapter as inspiring as I did, please give this video a thumbs up, and do UNT forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do UNT miss what happens next. We're getting ever closer to the first shots of the war. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Somber, reflective music begins softly and continues throughout. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the American Revolution. Today, we arrive at a moment suspended in time, a quiet dawn that would soon erupt with the sound that would echo for generations. This is Chapter 15. Dawn at Lexington. Thanks to the frantic, overnight rides of Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott, the warning had spread like wildfire across the Massachusetts countryside. In the pre-dawn chill of April 19, 1775, the Lexington militia, a small band of farmers, blacksmiths, and tradesmen began to assemble on the town common. They were not a professional army. They were husbands, fathers, and sons, roused from their beds to defend their homes and their rights. Captain John Parker, a veteran of the French and Indian War, stood with his men, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and uncertain of what the morning would bring. Their orders were not to fire unless fired upon. They were there to make a stand, a silent, defiant protest against the approaching Crown forces. As the first light of day began to streak across the eastern sky, the air grew thick with tension. The ground was still damp with morning dew. You can almost imagine the silence, broken only by the chirping of early birds and the nervous shuffling of feet. The men waited. They watched the road from Boston, their eyes straining to see through the morning mist. Each man likely wrestled with his own thoughts, his own fears. Was this the day they would have to fight their own countrymen? Was this how it would all begin? They knew the British regulars were on the march, sent by General Gage to seize the colonial military supplies stored in the nearby town of Concord. Lexington Green stood directly in their path. The 77 militiamen were a symbolic line in the sand, a physical representation of the colony's unwillingness to bend any further. Then they appeared. First, just a distant glint of red and steel, then a solid, advancing column of British infantry, the scarlet coats a stark, intimidating contrast against the green landscape. Major John Pitcairn led the British advance guard, his soldiers marching with the disciplined precision of the world's most powerful military. As they drew closer, the sheer scale of the force became terrifyingly clear. Hundreds of regular soldiers, bayonets fixed, advanced upon the small group of colonists. An officer shouted orders, his voice cutting through the quiet morning. Disperse, the rebels. Lay down your arms and disperse. Captain Parker, seeing the impossible odds, gave his men the order to disperse, but to hold their fire. The situation was chaotic, tense, and incredibly volatile. Men began to slowly back away, but in the confusion, a single shot rang out. To this day, no one knows for certain who fired it. Was it a nervous militiaman, a jumpy British soldier, or perhaps a shot from a nearby tavern or wall? It doesn't matter. That single, solitary crack of a musket was the spark that ignited the powder keg. It was as the poet Ralph Waldo Emerson would later immortalize it, the shot heard round the world. Immediately, the British regulars unleashed a volley of fire into the dispersing militia. The air, once still, was now filled with the roar of muskets, the acrid smell of gunpowder, and the cries of the wounded. The colonists, caught off guard and massively outmatched, scattered in every direction. When the smoke began to clear, the cost of that brief, brutal encounter became horrifyingly apparent. 8 American militiamen lay dead on the green, with another 10 wounded. Captain Parker's cousin, Jonas Parker, was one of them. He had vowed never to run from the British, and true to his word, he was bayoneted after being wounded by the first volley. The British suffered only one minor casualty. The confrontation on Lexington Green was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a tragic, one-sided skirmish, but its significance was immeasurable. The British regulars reformed their lines and continued their march toward Concord, leaving behind a scene of sorrow and disbelief. But the blood spilled on that common ground did not intimidate the colonists. It galvanized them. The news of the Lexington massacre, as it quickly became known, spread even faster than the initial warnings. Militiamen from surrounding towns, who had been mustering all morning, now marched with a new, grim purpose. They weren't just defending supplies anymore. They were avenging their fallen neighbors. The somber dawn had given way to a day of reckoning. The events at Lexington were monumental. They marked the definitive end of any hope for a peaceful resolution. This was no longer a debate over taxes and representation. It was now a war for survival, for independence. The first shots of the American Revolution had been fired, not in a grand, planned engagement, but in a confused, tragic clash on a village green. It was a somber beginning to what would become an 8-year struggle for the birth of a new nation. The sacrifice of those few men at Lexington set in motion a chain of events that would change the course of human history. proving that the will of a people determined to be free could in the end overcome even the mightiest of empires. Thank you for joining me for this solemn chapter in our story. The fight is far from over. In fact, it has just begun. Next time, we will follow the British to Concord and witness the colonists' fierce response on the long, bloody road back to Boston. If you find this history as compelling as I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, so you don't miss what happens next. Until then, take care. The smoke clears over the fields of Lexington and Concord, but the air is thick with something new, something irreversible. April 19th, 1775 will forever be etched in history, not just as a day of battle, but as the day the American Revolution truly began. What started as a British mission to seize colonial arms turned into a desperate, harrowing retreat. Imagine the scene. General Gage's elite troops, the finest soldiers of the world's greatest empire, marching back to Boston. But this wasn't a parade. It was a 16-mile gauntlet of fire. From behind every stone wall, every tree, every farmhouse, colonial militiamen, farmers, blacksmiths, merchants rose up. They were a swarm of angry hornets, relentlessly stinging the retreating redcoats. The British regulars, trained for open-field battles in Europe, were completely unprepared for this kind of guerrilla warfare. Their orderly columns dissolved into chaos. This wasn't just a military retreat. It was a psychological shattering. The colonists had proven they could stand up to the might of the British Army and not just stand, but fight back with ferocious determination. The myth of British invincibility was broken on the long road back to Boston. For the redcoats, it was a humiliating and bloody ordeal. For the colonists, it was a profound, earth-shaking victory. The news spread like wildfire. Riders galloped through the colonies, carrying the electrifying story. In town squares and taverns, people heard how ordinary citizens had driven back the king's professional soldiers. This wasn't just a skirmish anymore. It was war. The blood spilled on the green at Lexington and along the battle road had watered the seeds of revolution. And now, there was no turning back. The choice had been made, not by politicians in a stuffy hall, but by common men with muskets in their hands. This single day galvanized the colonies. The Second Continental Congress would soon convene, not to debate grievances, but to organize a continental army. What had been a protest movement, a series of political disputes over taxes and rights, had now become a full-fledged armed conflict. The colonies were no longer just disgruntled subjects. They were a people at war, fighting for a cause they now believed in more than ever. The cost was immense. Homes were burned. Lives were lost on both sides. We must remember the sacrifice. Every man who fell that day, whether a Minuteman defending his home or a redcoat following orders, was part of this tragic, transformative moment. The triumph was real, but it was paid for in blood. This mix of victory and sorrow is the very soul of the revolution. It was the understanding that freedom would not be granted. It had to be earned through courage, unity, and profound sacrifice. The impact was felt across the Atlantic. In London, the news was met with shock and disbelief. How could a rabble of untrained farmers stand against their disciplined army? King George III and Parliament could no longer dismiss the American colonists as mere agitators. They were now a credible military threat, and the empire had a full-blown rebellion on its hands. The battle forced a decision. Either crush the colonies with overwhelming force, or lose them forever. They chose the former, escalating the conflict into a war that would last for 8 long years. Looking back, the retreat to Boston was more than just a military event. It was the point of no return. It was the moment the abstract idea of liberty became a concrete struggle for survival and independence. The colonists had shown themselves, and the world, that their passion for freedom was not just rhetoric. It was a force powerful enough to challenge an empire. The revolution was no longer a possibility. It was an unstoppable reality, set in motion by the brave men who stood their ground and fought back on that fateful April day. The road from Concord to Boston became the road to American independence. It was a journey paved with defiance, courage, and the unwavering belief that a new nation, conceived in liberty, was worth fighting and dying for. The echoes of those musket shots still resonate today, reminding us of the price of our freedom and the extraordinary spirit of those who first dared to claim it. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story as powerful as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter in this incredible saga. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious. Hello, and welcome back to our journey through American history. We've galloped alongside Paul Revere on his legendary midnight ride, a story etched into the very soul of the nation. But what happens when the dust settles and the war is won? What becomes of the hero after the ride is over? That is the story we're re-exploring today. The remarkable life of Paul Revere after the Revolution and the enduring legacy he left behind. It's a tale not of a single night, but of a lifetime of dedication, innovation, and unwavering patriotism. With the Treaty of Paris signed and American independence secured, many figures of the Revolution faded back into private life, but not Paul Revere. The same energy and passion that propelled him through the Massachusetts countryside now fueled his ambitions in the new republic. He returned to his first love, his craft. His silversmith shop in Boston flourished, becoming a hub of artistry and commerce. But Revere was more than just a silversmith. He was an innovator, a pioneer of American industry. He expanded his business ventures with incredible foresight. Recognizing the needs of a growing nation, he opened one of America's first hardware stores. He became a skilled dentist, crafting dentures for his fellow Bostonians, including, it's believed, George Washington himself. But his ambition didn't stop there. Revere was fascinated by metalworking on a grander scale. He established an iron and brass foundry, casting cannons and bells that would ring out in churches and shipyards across New England. One of his most famous creations is the bell that still hangs in the King S Chapel in Boston. Its resonant tone, a testament to his skill. Revere's most significant industrial contribution, however, was yet to come. In 1801, with a loan from the federal government, he established the first successful copper rolling mill in North America, right here in Canton, Mass. This was a game changer. Before Revere, the young United States had to import copper sheeting from Britain, the very nation they had fought for independence. This reliance was a strategic weakness, especially for the Navy. Revere's mill changed everything. He provided the copper sheathing for the hull of the USS Constitution, old iron sides, protecting its wooden frame from shipworms and allowing it to become the legendary warship it is today. He was not just a craftsman. He was building the industrial backbone of a nation. Throughout all this success, Revere never lost his civic spirit. He remained a prominent and respected leader in Boston's community of artisans and mechanics, a vocal advocate for the working man. He was a Freemason, a community organizer, and a firm believer in the Federalist principles of a strong, centralized government that could protect and nurture American industry. He saw his business success not just as personal gain, but as a patriotic duty, strengthening the nation from within and ensuring its true economic independence. He understood that political freedom was fragile without the industrial might to support it. Now, what about the ride? It's fascinating to note that for decades after the Revolution, Paul Revere wasn't primarily known for his midnight gallop. He was known as Mr. Revere, the successful industrialist, the respected community leader. The ride was just one of many dangerous missions he undertook for the cause of liberty. He was a courier, an engraver of revolutionary propaganda, a soldier, and an organizer. He likely saw the ride as just another job that needed doing, a part of a much larger struggle. He was a humble man, more focused on the work at hand than on past glories. So, how did the ride become the legend we know today? We have a poet to thank for that. In 1861, on the eve of the Civil War, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow published his now famous poem, Paul Revere's Ride. Longfellow wasn't writing a strict historical account. He was crafting a national myth, a call to action for a country on the brink of tearing itself apart. He took the basic facts of Revere's journey and imbued them with drama, urgency, and a powerful sense of national unity. He needed a hero, a symbol of American courage who would ride to awaken a slumbering nation to a new danger. Longfellow's poem was a phenomenon. It was memorized by school children for generations, transforming Revere from a multi-talented patriot into the singular, iconic horseman of legend. The poem simplified the story, of course, It left out the other writers that night, William Dawes and Samuel Prescott, and it focused solely on Revere's journey to Lexington. But in doing so, it created something powerful, a shared story, a piece of American folklore that taught lessons of vigilance, courage, and the power of a single individual to make a difference. The poem ensured that Revere's name would echo through eternity, forever linked with that midnight message. Paul Revere passed away in 1818 at the age of 83. A long and full life lived in service to his country. He was buried in Boston's Granary Burying Ground, alongside other revolutionary giants like Samuel Adams and John Hancock. He had witnessed the birth of a nation and had played a crucial role in shaping its infancy, not just with a warning on horseback, but with the clanging of his hammer and the casting of bells and cannons. His legacy is twofold. There is the historical Revere, the master artisan, the brilliant entrepreneur, and the dedicated civic leader who helped build the foundations of American industry. And there is the legendary Revere, the lone rider, the folk hero, a symbol of American readiness and defiance, immortalized in verse bow. Both are equally important. The legend inspires us, while the history grounds us. It shows us that heroes aren't just figures from epic poems. They are real people craftsmen, business owners, community members who step up when their moment arrives. Revere's life is a testament to the idea that patriotism is confined to the battlefield or a single moment of heroism. It is expressed in the daily work of building a better, stronger, and more prosperous community. As we reflect on his incredible life, we might consider a thought that captures his spirit. In every person, there is a hero waiting to ride into the night. Paul Revere's story reminds us that courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about taking action in spite of it. It's about seeing a need and doing what must be done, whether it is warning your neighbors of approaching danger or building the industries that will secure your nation's future. His legacy isn't just a memory of a horse's hooves on a moonlit road. It's a living blueprint for citizenship. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Paul Revere. I hope it gave you a new appreciation for this truly remarkable American figure. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And do you forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you miss our next chapter in history. We'll see you next time.
Have you ever heard the story of Paul Revere, the lone hero galloping through the moonlit night, shouting, "The British are coming," to awaken every slumbering village? It's a powerful image, one that has been etched into the American consciousness for generations. But what if I told you that much of what we think we know is more myth than reality? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most iconic moments of the American Revolution, separating the legend from the historical facts. Our guide, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's famous 1861 poem, Paul Revere's Ride. This single piece of literature did more to shape our modern understanding of that night than any historical account. But why was it written, and how did it transform a real event into a national myth? Let's start with the poem. Longfellow begins with the famous lines, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." Right from the start, it's framed as a story, a tale for children. The poem paints a picture of a single, solitary rider, a lone beacon of courage against the looming threat of the British. He's the main character, the sole protagonist in a dramatic, high-stakes adventure. Longfellow's poem was published on the eve of the Civil War. It was a time of deep division and uncertainty in the United States. He wasn't just writing a history lesson, he was crafting a unifying symbol. He needed a hero to remind Americans of their shared heritage and the courage it took to forge a nation. Paul Revere, the silversmith and patriot, was the perfect candidate. The poem was a call to action, a reminder that the spirit of one individual could ignite a movement and save a country. But the reality of that night in April 1775 was a bit more complex and, frankly, far more interesting. Paul Revere wasn't alone. He was a key player in a highly organized and sophisticated alarm system set up by the Sons of Liberty. Think of it less as a solo act and more as a team effort, a revolutionary relay race. On that fateful night, 2 lanterns were indeed hung in the Old North Church, one if by land and 2 if by sea, a prearranged signal. But Revere wasn't the only one waiting for it. Another rider, a man named William Dawes, was also dispatched from Boston by a different route. Their mission was to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock, who were staying in Lexington, that British troops were on the move to arrest them and seize military supplies stored in Concord. So 2 riders set out, not one. Revere took the faster route, crossing the Charles River by boat before mounting his horse in Charlestown. Dawes took the longer land route over the Boston Neck. Both men successfully reached Lexington and delivered their warning to Adams and Hancock. But the story doesn't end there. In Lexington, they were joined by a third man, Dr. Samuel Prescott, a young physician who happened to be in town. The 3 of them then decided to ride on to Concord together to continue spreading the alarm. This is a part of the story Longfellow completely leaves out. The lone hero image wouldn't work as well with a trio, would it? As they rode towards Concord, their journey took a dramatic turn. They were ambushed by a British patrol. Here's another major difference from the myth. Paul Revere was captured. That's right, the great hero of the poem never made it to Concord. He was questioned by the British officers and eventually released, but his horse was confiscated. He had to walk back to Lexington. William Dawes was also thrown from his horse and was forced to retreat. It was the newcomer, Dr. Samuel Prescott, who managed to escape the patrol. He was the only one of the 3 to actually reach Concord and deliver the crucial warning that the British regulars were on their way to seize the colonists' munitions. And what about that famous line, "The British are coming"? It's highly unlikely Revere or any of the other riders shouted this. At the time, colonists still considered themselves British subjects. Yelling, "The British are coming," would have been confusing. Instead, historical accounts suggest they used a more discreet and accurate warning, like "The regulars are coming out," or "The regulars are on the march." It was a message intended for the network of local militia leaders, not a general shout to the public. So, why does the myth endure? Why do we remember the lone rider and not the team of patriots? Because Longfellow's poem was incredibly successful. It was memorable, it was rhythmic, and it told a simple, inspiring story. The myth served a purpose. It created a hero that embodied the American ideals of individualism, courage, and the power of one person to make a difference. It helped forge a national identity, especially during a time of crisis like the Civil War. The story of Paul Revere's Ride is a perfect example of how history and myth can become intertwined. The real story is one of organization, collaboration, and a network of dedicated individuals working together for a common cause. It's about people like William Dawes and Dr. Samuel Prescott, whose contributions have been largely overshadowed by the legend. The myth, however, is a powerful piece of cultural glue. It gives us a simple, heroic narrative that's easy to remember and pass down. It teaches a moral lesson about bravery and patriotism. Does it matter that it's not entirely accurate? In some ways, no. The myth inspires us, but understanding the reality behind the myth gives us a richer, more complete picture of our past. The real story shows that revolutions aren't sparked by a single hero, but by communities of people organized and ready to act. It was a network of riders, not just one. It was careful planning, not just a spontaneous act of bravery. The true story is less of a fairy tale and more of a testament to the power of collective action. So, the next time you picture Paul Revere on his midnight ride, remember the whole team. Remember Dawes, who took the long road. Remember Prescott, who finished the mission, and remember that the truth of history is often more complex and more collaborative than the legends we love to tell. The myth gives us a hero, but the history gives us a lesson in how real change happens together. Thanks for joining me on this journey into America's past. If you enjoyed untangling this piece of history, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. See you next time.
The video opens, perhaps with a dramatic, slow-motion shot of a historical reenactor on horseback at night, a lantern swinging. Hello and welcome back to our journey through history. Today, we arrive at Chapter 19. The symbol of warning and courage. This isn't just a story about a man on a horse. It's about the birth of a legend that would echo through the centuries. A tale that embodies the very spirit of a nation on the brink of revolution. We're talking, of course, about Paul Revere and his legendary midnight ride. So, let's set the scene. It's the night of April 18th, 1775. The air in Boston is thick with tension. Whispers of an impending British move to seize colonial arms at Concord are spreading like wildfire. This is the moment where preparation meets opportunity, where years of simmering discontent are about to boil over. And at the heart of it all is a network of patriots, ready to spring into action. Paul Revere, a silversmith, and a devoted son of liberty, was a key figure in this intelligence network. His task was monumental, to ride from Charlestown to Lexington and Concord, to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock that the British regulars were on the move. But this was never a one-man show. It was a carefully coordinated effort, a symphony of defiance. Remember the famous signal? 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea. From the steeple of the Old North Church, 2 lanterns flickered, cutting through the darkness. The British were coming by sea, crossing the Charles River. For Revere, waiting on the opposite shore. This was the signal. The ride had begun. As Revere galloped through the Massachusetts countryside, his cry wasn't the famous "The British are coming" that we often hear. Historical accounts suggest he was much more discreet, shouting, "The regulars are out." He was a secret agent on a covert mission, not a town crier. His goal was to wake the militia leaders and the network of patriots, not to cause a widespread panic that would alert the very troops he was trying to outrun. His ride was a race against time, a desperate dash through the darkness, dodging British patrols and carrying the fate of the burgeoning revolution on his shoulders. He wasn't alone. either. Writers like William Dawes and Samuel Prescott were also part of this critical operation, spreading the alarm along different routes. It was a testament to the colonists' organization and their unwavering commitment to their cause. Each beat of his horse's hooves on the dirt road was a drumbeat of defiance, a signal that the colonists would not stand idly by. It was a message of readiness. The immediate impact of Revere's ride was profound. When the British troops arrived in Lexington the next morning, they didn't find a sleeping, unprepared town. Instead, they were met by a small but determined company of colonial militiamen, standing their ground on the village green. The shot heard round the world was fired, and the American Revolutionary War had begun. The alarm raised by Revere and the other riders had given the colonists the precious time they needed to organize and prepare. It transformed a planned British surprise attack into a full-blown confrontation. The readiness that Revere'S ride enabled was the crucial first step in the long and arduous journey towards American independence. It demonstrated that the colonies were not just a collection of disgruntled farmers. They were a unified force, capable of coordinated action and fierce resistance. This single night of daring and courage set the stage for the entire conflict. Beyond its immediate military significance, Revere's ride became a powerful symbol. It came to represent the courage to stand up against overwhelming odds. Think about it. A single individual, riding through the night, risking his life to warn his countrymen. It's a story of personal bravery in the face of tyranny, a narrative that resonates deeply with the American spirit of individualism and defiance. Revere became the embodiment of the everyday citizen, transformed into a hero by circumstance and conviction. His courage wasn't that of a general leading an army, but that of a common man doing what he believed was right, regardless of the personal cost. This is the kind of courage that inspires generations. The idea that one person's actions can indeed change the course of history. It's a reminder that heroism isn't always found on the battlefield, but often in the quiet, determined acts of ordinary people. And then there's the theme of unity. Revere's ride wasn't just about warning a few individuals. It was about connecting a community, uniting disparate towns and villages under a common cause. His message spread from house to house, from town to town, weaving a network of solidarity across the Massachusetts landscape. It symbolized the transition from 13 separate colonies into a unified front, ready to fight for a shared ideal of liberty. The ride was a physical manifestation of the phrase, E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. It showed that when faced with a common threat, the colonists could come together, transcending their local differences, to act as one people. This message of unity, carried on horseback through the dead of night, became a cornerstone of the new American identity. The cultural legacy of this event is immense. For many years after the Revolution, Revere's ride was just one of many stories of revolutionary heroism. But that all changed in 1861 with the publication of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, Paul Revere's Ride. Published on the eve of the Civil War, Longfellow's poem transformed Revere into a national folk hero. He used the story as a call for unity and courage in a fractured nation, crafting a powerful narrative that captured the public imagination, though it takes some artistic liberties. The poem has stirring rhythm and vivid imagery. Listen, my children, and you shall hear. Of the midnight ride of Paul Revere, cemented the story in the American consciousness forever. It became required reading for school children, ensuring that every generation would know the tale of the lone rider and his urgent message. Longfellow's poem opened the floodgates. The image of Revere on his horse, silhouetted against the moon, has been captured in countless paintings and illustrations. One of the most famous is Grant Wood's whimsical 1931 painting, which presents a bird's eye, almost storybook view of the event, emphasizing its mythic quality. These artistic interpretations have helped to visualize and romanticize the ride, turning it from a historical event into an epic legend. Each painting, each illustration, adds another layer to the myth, reinforcing Revere's status as a symbol of American resolve. It is a testament to the power of art to shape our understanding of history and to create enduring national symbols. The legacy doesn't stop with poems and paintings. Every year, on Patriot's Day in Massachusetts, the ride is men and women, dressed in period costume, mount their horses and trace Revere's historic route cheered on by crowds of onlookers. These reenactments are a living tradition, a tangible connection to the past. They are a communal act of remembrance, bringing history to life and passing the story on to a new generation. They serve as a powerful reminder of the sacrifices made and the principles upon which the nation was founded. It's one thing to read about history in a book. It's another thing entirely to see and hear it, to feel the thunder of hooves on pavement, and to participate in a shared moment of national pride. In the end, the story of Paul Revere's ride is more than just a historical account. It has become a foundational American myth, a symbol of readiness, courage, and unity that continues to inspire. It is a story that reminds us that history is made by the actions of individuals who are willing to take a stand. It teaches us that a single voice, or in this case, a single writer, can awaken a nation. The symbol of the Midnight Ride endures, because it speaks to the best of what we aspire to be. Prepared in the face of adversity, courageous in the pursuit of our beliefs, and united in our common purpose. It's not just a chapter in a history book, it's a piece of our collective soul. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of one of America's most iconic moments. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more journeys into the past. We love hearing from you, so leave a comment below with your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious. It began with a single rider in the dark, a lone voice piercing the silence of a slumbering countryside. It ended with a nation born. As we bring our journey through the American Revolution to a close, let's take a moment to reflect on the immense power held within a single voice. It's a theme that echoes through every chapter of this grand story. A quiet but persistent melody beneath the thunder of cannons and the declarations of men. Think of Paul Revere, his urgent cry, "The Regulars are coming out." It wasn't a king's decree or a general's command. It was the voice of a fellow citizen, a neighbor, a friend, carried on the night wind. That one voice, multiplied by others who heard and believed, awakened a people. It transformed sleeping farmers into vigilant minutemen, ready to stand their ground on a village green. It was a chain reaction sparked by a single, determined word. Consider the voices raised in the halls of Philadelphia. Men like Patrick Henry, whose passionate plea for liberty or death ignited the spirits of his fellow delegates. His words were not just sounds. They were catchy in the hearts of those who listened, forging a common will from a dozen disparate colonies. Or Thomas Paine, a man armed to a little more than a quill and an ink. His pamphlet, Common Sense, was just a collection of words on a page, yet it spoke a language everyone could understand. It articulated the feelings that simmered in the hearts of thousands, giving them the clarity and courage to envision a future without a king. His voice, printed and passed from hand to hand, became the voice of a continent. This power wasn't limited to the famous and the eloquent. It belonged to the soldier shivering at Valley Forge, sharing a story of home to keep a comrade's spirit from freezing. It belonged to the woman managing a farm, writing a letter of encouragement to her husband on the front lines, her words a lifeline across the miles. It belonged to the spy, whispering a crucial piece of intelligence in a crowded tavern. A single sentence that could alter the course of a battle. Each of these was a single voice, a single act of communication. Yet, when woven together, they created a symphony of revolution. They built a foundation of shared belief, a collective understanding that they were no longer just subjects of a distant empire, but architects of something new, something their own. The American Revolution teaches us that history is not just shaped by grand armies and pivotal battles. It is moved by the conviction of individuals, by the courage to speak up, to share an idea, to warn a neighbor, to inspire a friend. It demonstrates that no voice is too small when it speaks the truth or defends a deeply held belief. The most powerful movements begin not with a roar, but with a whisper that is heard, repeated, and amplified until it becomes an undeniable force. From the flickering light of a single lantern, carried by one rider through the darkness, came the dawn of a new nation. That light, like a single voice, was small and vulnerable, but it carried a message of hope, of defiance, and of a future waiting to be claimed. As the sun rises over the flag that represents this hard-won liberty, we are reminded of this enduring lesson. Never underestimate the power of one voice to change the world. It is a legacy that belongs to every single one of us. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through history. If you've enjoyed these stories and reflections, Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more. Your support helps us continue to share these powerful lessons from the past. Until next time, take care.